One. I'm Stefan.
I'm Alina.
And I'm Percy.
And we're Tentsmiths. Come with us today. We're going to show you how to set up and some of the features of one of our most popular styles, the standard wall tent. We're going to begin by talking about the components that are involved in setting up your wall tent. First and foremost will be our verticals and our ridge pole. You will notice that both of these, or all of these, are sleeved, segmented poles that are made by Tentsmiths, allowing for easier transportation. Next, we move over to the perimeter poles, and like the verticals, there are no pins currently inside the tops of the poles. Those are all separated, and we'll be looking at here next. These are your pins. We keep them separate so that it's easier to transport your tent and to fit it into smaller spaces. Likewise, it means if a pin bends or gets damaged or lost, it's easy to replace. Right next to the pins, we have our stakes. In this case, we have two sizes. The smaller stakes we'll be using for the walls, and the larger stakes we'll be using for the corners and also for tying out our ropes. Speaking of our ropes, here we have them, complete with dog bones. Those are the wooden sliders that you see attached. Next, we come to the floor for the tent. Yours may or may not have one. And finally, this big bag of canvas that is the wall tent itself. So first thing is realize that exactly where you want your tent to be is where you put all your crap. And move all your crap so you can put up your tent.
Because really the flattest surface is going to make staying in the tent the best experience.
Alright, now we have the first thing we need, which in our case is floor. You may or may not have a floor. If you don't, skip over this part. If you do, you're going to see there's some advantages. If you're deciding on whether or not to get a floor, this may help. Spread your floor out. Where you want your tent to end up. Now, as you can see, this floor is disgusting because we recently used it, and this is our first time cleaning it off since then. Whoops. Which is part of why we're setting it up. No matter what you do, your floor is going to end up looking dirty. But we will sweep this out when we're all done.
I can help you.
So, if you have a floor, it makes this next step on a wall tent far simpler. If you do not have a floor, we're going to explain what to do as we get there anyway. Go ahead and take your ridge pole and your center poles, or your end poles, and lay them out.
I can help you.
Okay. Take that one over there, please.
Which side are you laying them out on? That side?
Which one does this go on?
That's not going
Dada, which
it's
one
stuck
does
on the floor.
this go on?
There we go.
Which one does this
It doesn't,
go
there we
on?
go, now it's going together.
Which one does this go
Here,
on?
that side. You're good.
Right here?
There we go. Make sure your ridge pole is together tightly. Because we have a floor, we know exactly how long that should be. Grab the pins for your ends. Now, in our case, this particular tent has an awning that often is going on. Today we're not putting it on, but that is why we have one pin much longer than the other pin. That it goes on this end. This one goes over here. Try to line up your square sections so they're not offset. Not that we've done that before. Oh. Recognize that the sleeve section always goes to the top.
Gravity. It's your
So
friend.
gravity pulls it on.
Gravity is actually your friend.
Some in the
Some gravities are your friend.
Now you need your tent. If you don't have a floor, you'd go ahead and do the poles. Get your canvas. Let's do it.
We don't need those yet, buddy.
If you are taking your tent out for the first time, it will be much smaller than this. It will never be that small again.
It's okay. We can't fold them that small after they come out of the shop.
Yeah, it's fine when they're clean and nice and new. Most wall tents come standard with a single door. You're going to want to make sure that your door is to the front of wherever you want your tent to be, in that case up there. This one happens to have two doors, so it doesn't really matter which one we put where. Open up your tent until you find there's the bottom, the center.
Got this one, Dada.
Yeah, that's not the center yet. Oh!
Which is going to go over the ridge pole. Now, you want to take your corners and pull them to the corners of your floor. Go
So
to this
I
corner.
actually have what we usually put in the back, only because this particular tent has a stove jack.
Ah, so we should turn it around.
I think so.
All right, so Lena has the back. So we're going this way.
This one. Where I am heading.
Now we're going to take the corners to roughly the corners of the floor. If you do not have
Pulling.
a floor for your tent, if you do not have a floor for your tent, I will face the camera as I talk.
Help me.
You're going to want to,
Help me, Mama.
well, even if you do, this next step is a good one to do. We need a hammer. We need a hammer for stakes.
Or two.
Or two. Stakes come in two sizes, large and small. You see the difference here. The large ones are where what you're going to want to use for anything really structural, anything that's keeping the tent up. Small ones are great for holding down walls. Don't generally use them on anything that's load bearing. Start with the large stake. Find the center loop in your front door and find what is roughly the center. And pin that in. Doesn't have to be too firm right now. This is just there to hold tension. Now that you have that in, you can set the corners. If you have a floor, it's really simple. Match the corner up with the corner of the floor. If you don't, not a problem because you have tension to pull on that stake. Now you'll notice when I drive stakes in, I pull this up so I'm not pounding against the ground and let it ride down without pushing against the stake and the ground. Saves your stake loops.
Mama.
Go to the other side and do the same thing.
I'm thirsty.
We'll get you something to drink when we're done.
All right, once you have that in, you're going to drive in the back stakes. Because we have a floor, Alina's able to pull snug. You pull snug?
It was mostly going on the floor.
Okay.
Look at
and make sure that you have everything right. Then we're going to do the same thing on the other side. If you have not got a floor, then we're going to want to tie that back door, which I'm going to do now. Hey Percy, would you be able to bring me a large stake, please?
Yes.
The floor is not actually comfortable.
That's because the canvas is already stretched.
Stop it.
That's a good point. The more you use your tent, the more the canvas is going to shift, give, stretch. So your floor may not be exactly on, but it will fit a lot better if you use the corner of the tent and not the top of the wall like you just did.
Dada.
It's very confusing on a wall tent because you have loops both at the top of the wall and at the bottom of the wall. Let me show you up front because it's a little easier. It's something that's super easy to do.
Dada.
This loop here, hold on please, thank you. This loop here is going to be what holds the top of a perimeter pole. Same type of loop as the stake, so it can be confusing. All right, bring it here, buddy. So in the back, we're not going to drive the stake in like we did before. If you don't have a door, it's not a problem. If you do have a door, just tie that together and base your position more off of the front stake and just putting a little tension with the back stake. All right, now you have those four corners in. We can pull that front stake and we can lift this thing up. Do you want me in the front or back?
Front.
Okay. Front and center. All right. Pull my stake. Because this is a wall tent, if you've happened to have set up a wedge tent before, you'll know this might be really hard and might have a lot of tension. Because it's a wall tent, there's a lot more give here, so this should be pretty easy for us to do. We're going to show you how to do it as two people. It can be done with one person, but if you're at an event and can't talk somebody else into helping you put up a pole, then you might have bigger problems. All right, when you're first setting this up, first couple times you set up a tent, it's going to take a while to stretch and give. So get one of the pins on the grommet and then do the other side. You might have to stretch a bit, as I did. If you're having a hard time, back your pin down to the top of the ridge pole, stretch the end cap over the ridge pole, and then work up and through instead of trying to fight that angle. Once you're in, we're ready to go. Now this is a segmented front pole, a segmented back pole. So I want to remember that when raising this up, I can't grab up there and expect this to follow. I have to grab both. So you're going to get to see my back side. Get it part way up and then ease it between the two of you. Trying always to keep the front pole and the back pole relatively in line with each other. If you had to do it by yourself, that's exactly what you would do actually, is pull it up a little bit and then walk each side up a little at a time. Once you get this up, even though it's sloppy to either side, it's not going to fall, and you can do the rest by yourself if you had to.
Now we need perimeter poles, ropes, and stakes.
Lots and lots of stakes. At this point, before there's much tension and before the poles go into place, I like to go along and push all my mud flaps in. A lot of folks don't realize that the mud flap is actually designed to go underneath the floor.
pretty good, Mama.
Helps create an envelope. Keep all the moisture out of your tent.
Two little sticks.
Honestly, mud flaps, especially when you get to World War II and even Rev War and stuff, the French referred to them as rot claws. They're designed to eventually dissolve and go away. So that won't likely happen on a modern tent. But when you first get your ropes and dog bones from us, they're going to come lightly coiled up, but one end's going to be untied. There'll be a knot through the dog bone. The other end will not be tied. That's so that if you want to, you can tie it directly to the loop that the pole is going to go into. We don't recommend that because that means you have to store your ropes with your canvas. These ropes are wonderful, but they are manila, sisal. Right now we're using manila, but these are manila ropes and they will eventually start to bleed out onto the tent. If you are going to leave them permanently attached to the tent, we recommend washing them in a light detergent first, something like just any light detergent, Dawn is fine, and making sure they're nice and clean and dry. These, what I'm going to do instead is make a loop, just an overhand loop. And at least I can go on mute at this point. So we have a loop like that. And this is going to be what goes on our poles.
You keep it for when you need good.
So, your perimeter poles, all your poles are going to come with the pins separate. They just drop in. This is intentional. This means that if you need to store or transport this, you can do so in a smaller space. If you want that pole or pin to stay in the pole forever, we recommend a little bit of Gorilla Glue. Not a ton. It will never come back out, but it'll never come back out. If you ever need to replace a pin, for whatever reason it gets bent or something, you're stuck replacing the whole pole. This way it's just finding another piece of rod stock. So when you put these in the corner, you drop them in, put your rope on, and your corners are going to have to come out at roughly a 45-degree angle to keep the tent tight. Which is what we're going to do. We're going to do this one-handed, just to show you we can. Now the reason you have perimeter poles is so that you don't have to put your ropes so far. So we're going to go pretty steep in part so we don't hit my walkway. You'll notice again, I am not letting the rope sit against the ground when I do that. Just like I'm going to protect my stakes, I want to protect my ropes. Let's see if I'm in frame, yeah. You may not have noticed me pounding that in, but when I did so, I kept the rope near the top as I pound down, protect the rope. We do offer brass rings on our ropes. Some people like that just to preserve the rope a little longer. So now we're going to put in all the other poles. It's going to take a little bit. It's not going to be that exciting, but we'll be back. So if you are not using perimeter poles, and to be clear, this tent is designed to not use perimeter poles. Historically, especially in a military situation, carrying all this extra wood around with you or having to refurnish or refashion poles whenever you get to where you're going, it's a pain in the butt. So most of the time, these are going to be tied directly to the loop and run out from there. So that's, just something to keep in mind. The difficulty is to get the proper tension on the tent. You're going to have to bring your ropes out at the same angle at least as the roof itself is, which means you have to go a lot further out from your tent.
Thanks.
Now I ran that one straight down at almost the full length, or the abbreviated length of the rope. I could go tighter. I could shorten these ropes up considerably if I wanted to. If you want to go without perimeter poles, which as I said is more accurate, you can still do the same type of loop and not have to permanently attach these to your tent if you don't want to. Just run this up through the loop on the side of the tent and drop a toggle in there. Just any twig will do, random piece of kit that you got lying around, a broken spoon handle, whatever. And that'll help hold it up. And then when you're all done, pop it back out. There is a chance in a really windy day it could pop out, but not if you keep good tension on it. So. We haven't talked about staking down your walls yet. You are going to want to stake them down. It's going to reduce any chance of things flapping, blowing around. You have a choice whether you do that before all the poles go in or after the poles go in. Some people like to do them before the poles go in, just so that the poles don't get in the way. By the way, you're going to be using your smaller stakes when you do that. I personally like to put the poles in first because we have a lot of people in camp with various different skills. I know my wife always wants to get started on the inside of the tent and all the things she's got to set up, bed, tables, all those sorts of things, while I'm worrying about getting the rest of the unit set up. And there's always somebody around who maybe is not sure what to do, or not necessarily someone you want doing anything too dangerous or too involved, and you can send them around and have them pound in those wall stakes while you do it. All right, back to it.
I will take one more, buddy.
Now when we send you these ropes, we're going to send them to you with the idea that you might use them without perimeter poles, even if you ordered the perimeter poles. So we're going to send them to you fairly long. If you're using them sometimes with and sometimes without, I want to show you a little trick I like to use. Do I put that knot in? If I find that these ropes turn out to be a little too long because I can make such a steep angle with perimeter poles, I can always go to the other side of the dog bone where I've got this knot, pull it out a bit, and just do a slip knot. Shortens the whole thing up. That slip knot will be fine for the weekend or whatever your event may be. When you're all done, get a little tension on there, pull that slip knot out, and now you're back to a long rope. So I would normally pound these stakes in further, almost to the ground. I don't like to pound them, don't pound them all the way into the ground. You need to be able to get them out afterwards. Get a stake puller or something in there. Unless you have stakes that are maybe on ropes in the front that you want to take maybe weather lines off during the day as a vendor, and you pound them flush so people don't trip. But we're leaving these a little proud right now because we're only setting this up for a short time. Alright, so outside of putting some stakes in the wall, our tent is up, we're ready to go. If you have an awning, that's a whole nother thing. We'll probably do a separate video about it. And honestly, you're not going to set up a tent like this with an awning unless you have 3 people, because there's nothing supporting that front ridge pole as it all goes up. It's a lot of canvas. This tent does have an awning with it. We're just not setting it up right now. But I want to show you some things inside the tent. Talk a little bit about floor versus no floor. And alright guys, so we're going to go into the tent here. We're going to look around at a couple things. I do want to point out that we do have some areas where the tent is maybe, tighter on one side than it is on the other. You're going to see that it's called ground. It's remarkably uncompliant in staying completely level. Maybe if you're in a state park somewhere or on a platform, you'll have a perfect setup, but it's unlikely in most of your situations. Let's look into the tent a little. So here at the front, we're going to notice something very important. The overlap on the door, right? You see that double overlap. It's designed with a certain type of ties. You can tell the left from the right. First of all, because they're going to overlap that way. Right side's always going to overlap the left. The left side, they're going to have ties on the outside. They're going to have ties on the inside. And then the left side is going to have, turn it please, one more set of ties. And that will make sense in just a little bit. We're going to show you what that does. But each side on a wall tent and most of your wedges, you're going to have at some point a tie that you can use for holding your door open during the day. Now wedge tents will have a couple of these. Wall tents really only have the one because the shape of the wall makes it very hard to roll it up otherwise. So we'll do that for you in a minute. But let's look inside the tent. So this is a pretty big, roomy wall tent. We haven't finished staking out the floor yet, but you can see on this side how we've, there you go. You can see on this side how we've put the mud flaps underneath the floor. When we stake all those in, it'll keep everything nice and tight. It's one of the things I like about putting up the poles first is I can come inside and just kind of put the floor where I want it to be. And then we see the back. This one has a door. I'm going to pause for a minute and then I'm going to show you what those double ties are for. So this is an example of what those double ties on the left side can do. You can use them to hold one of your panels tight. Likewise, or obviously, if we tied the outside here, it would keep the whole door tight up against the pole. And if you want, you can tie in such a fashion that you do the inside ties as well. But that's just good if you're seeing a lot of movement on this door, especially in the wind or something. That's why we add those on for you. Or if during the day, for a demonstration, you want to leave one up, one side of your door up and the other side down, that makes it a little easier. Alright, so now we're looking at a stove jack. This is a tent that happens to have a stove jack in the back corner. This one is set up for a 5-inch pipe. I'm going to have Alina open it from the outside. Just held up with Velcro there. And then she can roll it up, and there are toggles that can be used to hold it all out of the way. Like with rolling a door or anything else, you'll want to roll it in such a way that any weather stays out. And there's a Percy in the window. Look in there again, bud.